While history remembers the generals, the politicians, and the grand strategies of World War II, one of the Allies' most powerful assets was a secret weapon the Axis never saw coming. It was a weapon hidden in plain sight, underestimated at every turn, and in the end, absolutely vital to the Allied victory. They were the world's deadliest snipers, brilliant code breakers, and the industrial masterminds behind the war's most crucial machines. These were the women who helped change the course of the war. And this is their story. When we picture the Second World War, our minds fill with images of soldiers storming beaches and tanks rolling across ravaged landscapes. It's a story largely told through the lens of men in combat. But that's only half the picture. The other half took place in quiet country estates, in the dead of night over enemy territory, on factory floors humming with machinery, and in the crosshairs of a sniper's scope. This is the story of how millions of women across the globe stepped out of the roles society had assigned them and into the crucible of war, not just as support, but as a strategic force. They weren't just participating. They were innovating, leading, and fighting with a ferocity and ingenuity that helped turn the tide of the war. They proved that courage has no gender and that the most effective weapon can be the one you least expect. We begin in a place where the war was fought not with bullets but with brains. Bletchley Park. The code breakers of Bletchley Park. In the quiet English countryside, far from the bombs and battles, stood a Victorian estate known as Bletchley Park. On the surface, it was HMS Pembroke Femf, a naval outpost curiously located over 100 miles from the sea. In reality, it was the top-secret heart of Britain's war effort, a place where the most brilliant minds gathered to fight a shadow war against Germany's masterfully complex encryption. At the centre of this fight was the Enigma machine, a device the Nazis used to send coded messages they believed were unbreakable. Breaking Enigma was the key to understanding German strategy, anticipating U-boat attacks, and saving countless Allied lives. And the workforce tasked with this monumental effort was, to the surprise of many, overwhelmingly female. By 1945, of the nearly 10,000 personnel at Bletchley Park and its outstations, a staggering 75% were women. Recruited from universities, the Women's Royal Naval Service, the Wrens, and even through cryptic crossword competitions, these women came from all walks of life. Initially, many male supervisors were skeptical, believing women weren't suited for intellectual work or operating the complex machinery. They were profoundly wrong. These women became the beating heart of Bletchley. They operated the massive, noisy bomb machines, electromechanical computers designed by Alan Turing and others to find the daily Enigma settings. Working in grueling 8-hour shifts around the clock, they stood in rooms filled with the deafening clatter of relays, testing endless combinations to find a crack in the code. Others were listeners, tuning into German frequencies to intercept messages, painstakingly writing down every single letter. And some, like Joan Clark, were full-fledged cryptanalysts working alongside Turing himself at the highest levels of decryption. Clark, a brilliant mathematician from Cambridge, became deputy head of her unit, a rare position for a woman in a male-dominated hierarchy. Then there were the women of Dilly's Girls, a team assembled by the eccentric codebreaker Dilly Knox. This all-female team achieved one of the war's greatest intelligence coups, breaking the Abwehr Enigma, the code used by German intelligence. This breakthrough allowed the Allies to control the German spy network in Britain, feeding them false information and masterfully deceiving them about critical operations, most notably the D-Day landings. The work was compartmentalized and shrouded in absolute secrecy. Many women had no idea how their specific task fit into the larger picture. They only knew that precision was a matter of life and death. One misplaced letter could mean a convoy lost to a U-boat wolfpack or a battle plan catastrophically compromised. They spoke to no one of their work, not their families, not their friends. It was only decades after the war that the world began to understand their contribution. Historians widely agree that the intelligence produced at Bletchley Park shortened the war, with some estimating by as much as 2 to 4 years, saving millions of lives. They were, as Winston Churchill privately called them, the geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled. The Night Witches. While the women of Bletchley fought with their minds, on the Eastern Front, another group of women was fighting a very different kind of war, in the sky. They were the 588th Night Bomber Regiment of the Soviet Air Forces, an aviation unit unique in modern warfare. It was composed entirely of women, from the pilots and navigators to the mechanics and ground crew. Formed in 1941 by the famed aviator Marina Raskova, these volunteers were mostly young women in their late teens and early 20s. Facing skepticism from their male counterparts, they were given outdated equipment. Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes, which were slow, flimsy aircraft made of plywood and canvas. These planes had no armor, no radios, and in the early days, no parachutes. They were essentially flying crop dusters armed with bombs. The open cockpits exposed the pilots to the brutal elements, with frostbite a constant danger. But they turned this seeming disadvantage into a terrifying weapon. Their planes were too small to be picked up by radar and too slow to register on infrared locators. This allowed them to develop a unique and horrifying tactic. Under the cover of darkness, they'd fly towards their targets, cut their engines, and glide silently through the night. The only sound they made was a soft, eerie whooshing noise, which to the German soldiers below sounded like the whisper of a broomstick. It was often the last thing they ever heard, and it earned the pilots their legendary nickname, Nachthexen, the Night Witches. Their mission was harassment bombing. Night after night, they would fly multiple sorties, sometimes 8 or more in a single night per crew, returning to base just to refuel and rearm. Their goal was to deny the enemy sleep, shatter their morale, and destroy supply depots and command posts. The psychological impact was immense. The Germans were so terrified and infuriated by these invisible female flyers that any pilot who shot down a Night Witch was automatically awarded the prestigious Iron Cross. Over 3 years of service, the Night Witches flew more than 23,000 combat sorties and dropped over 3,000 tons of bombs. They were relentless, brave, and extraordinarily effective. By the end of the war, the 588th had become the most highly decorated female unit in the Soviet Air Force, with 23 of its members awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. They took the derogatory nickname given to them by their enemies and wore it as a badge of honor, a symbol of their skill and their indomitable spirit. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, Lady Death. While the Night Witches terrorized the German army from the sky, a lone woman was striking fear into their hearts from the shadows of the trenches. Her name was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, and she would become the most successful female sniper in recorded history. Born in a small Ukrainian village, Pavlichenko was a competitive tomboy who joined a shooting club as a teenager, just to prove she could shoot as well as the boys. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, she was a 24-year-old history student at Kiev University. She immediately walked into a recruiting office to enlist. The registrar pushed her to become a nurse, but Pavlichenko refused. She presented her sharpshooter certificate and was assigned to the Red Army's 25th Rifle Division, becoming one of roughly 2,000 women to serve as snipers for the Soviet Union, of whom only about 500 would survive the war. She was issued a Mosin Nagant rifle but had to wait for a real combat opportunity. When it came, she proved her worth instantly, taking out 2 enemy soldiers from a distance. From that moment on, she became a hunter. During the brutal sieges of Odessa and Sevastopol, Pavlichenko's reputation grew. For her, killing was a grim necessity. "The only feeling I have," she once stated, "is the great satisfaction a hunter feels who has killed a beast of prey." Her confirmed kill count began to climb at an astonishing rate, 187 in Odessa. By May of 1942, during the hellish fighting in Sevastopol, that number had risen to 257. As her tally grew, so did the danger. She was sent on counter-sniping duels, hunting the enemy's most skilled marksmen. She engaged in 36 of these duels and won every single one. One duel lasted for 3 agonizing days, a battle of wits and patience, until, as she put it, her opponent made one move too many. The Germans came to know her, fear her, and hate her. They gave her the nickname Lady Death. They even tried to bribe her over loudspeakers, promising rank and chocolate if she would defect. She became a symbol of Soviet resistance, a ghost on the battlefield who dealt death with chilling precision. In June 1942, after less than a year of combat, Pavlichenko was wounded by mortar shrapnel. The Soviet High Command, considering her too valuable a symbol to lose, pulled her from the front lines. Her final official tally stood at 309 confirmed kills, which remains the highest for any female sniper in history. But her war wasn't over. She became a spokesperson for the Red Army, sent to tour the United States, Canada, and Great Britain to rally support for a second front in Europe. In America, she stood before crowds and took the male journalist to task for being more interested in her makeup and the length of her skirt than her accomplishments. In Chicago, she famously declared, "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old and I have killed 309 fascist occupants by now. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" She formed an unlikely friendship with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and became a powerful voice for women in combat. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was more than a sniper. She was a warrior who shattered every stereotype about women in war. The spies, Virginia Hall. While some women fought on the front lines, others waged war from the shadows in a world of secrets and subterfuge. In this clandestine world, one woman became so feared by the enemy that the Gestapo considered her the most dangerous of all Allied spies. Her name was Virginia Hall, but the Germans knew her only as the Limping Lady. An American from a wealthy family, Hall's dream of becoming a diplomat was shattered when a hunting accident led to the amputation of her lower left leg. She was fitted with a wooden prosthetic, she nicknamed Cuthbert. When war broke out, she was in France and volunteered as an ambulance driver before escaping to London. There, she joined Britain's new Special Operations Executive, or SOE, an organisation for espionage and sabotage. In August 1941, she became the first female SOE agent sent into France for an extended mission. Posing as a reporter for the New York Post, she established herself in Lyon, the heart of the French resistance. She was a master of disguise and organisation, building spy networks, coordinating parachute drops, and helping downed Allied airmen escape. The Nazis simply couldn't believe a woman, let alone one with a limp, could be such an elusive agent. But the Gestapo chief in Lyon, Klaus Barbie, became obsessed with catching her, plastering wanted posters describing the Limping Lady. By late 1942, she had to flee, making a harrowing escape on foot over the snow-covered Pyrenees Mountains into Spain, an excruciating journey with her prosthetic leg. When she radioed London that Cuthbert was giving her trouble, a clueless operator replied, "If Cuthbert is giving you trouble, have him eliminated." Deemed too compromised to return with the SOE, Hall joined the American Office of Strategic Services, OSS. In 1944, she demanded to be sent back into France. Disguised as an elderly milkmaid, she returned to coordinate resistance ahead of the D-Day landings. She armed and trained 3 battalions of French resistance fighters, leading them in guerrilla warfare with such success that they cleared entire regions of German soldiers. For her extraordinary bravery, Virginia Hall was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the only civilian woman to receive one in World War II. She was a woman who turned her perceived weaknesses into her greatest strengths, running rings around the enemy and proving that the most effective spies are often the ones you'd never suspect. The industrial might. While spies and snipers fought a covert war, another equally vital battle was being waged on the home front, particularly in the United States. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had declared America must become the arsenal of democracy. But with millions of men off to fight, who would build that arsenal? The answer came as an unprecedented mobilization of women into the workforce, symbolized by an iconic figure, Rosie the Riveter. With slogans like "We can do it," posters depicted a strong, determined woman ready to take her place on the factory floor. And they did, in staggering numbers. Over 6 million American women took up jobs in wartime industries. They were production soldiers, leaving roles as waitresses and maids to become welders, crane operators, and riveters. They built bombers, ships, and tanks, operated massive presses, and loaded ammunition. At first, there was resistance from male managers who doubted women had the strength or mechanical aptitude. But necessity quickly overrode prejudice. Women were often found to be quicker to learn and more meticulous in their work. In the aircraft industry, women were especially vital, making up a huge portion of the labour force. For many women, this was their first taste of financial independence. They proved to themselves and the nation that they were capable of doing any job a man could do. The impact was decisive. American industrial production during the war was miraculous, overwhelming the Axis with a sheer volume of planes, ships, and weapons. That production was powered by women. Every bomb dropped, every bullet fired, and every plane flown was connected to the tireless work of these women. They were the engine, heart of the war effort, the hands that built the arsenal that would secure freedom. The global resistance beyond organized armies and factory floors, women were the backbone of resistance movements across occupied Europe. From the streets of Paris to the forests of Poland, they waged a dangerous clandestine war where discovery meant torture and death. In France, women made up as much as 20% of the resistance, undertaking every task imaginable. They were couriers using their perceived innocence to their advantage. Young women on bicycles ferried messages and weapons past German checkpoints, less likely to be searched than men. They ran underground newspapers and sheltered Jewish families and downed pilots. Figures like Lucy Aubrac not only co-founded a major resistance network but also carried out an armed raid, while pregnant, to free her husband from a Gestapo convoy. The story was the same across the continent. In Poland, women were vital to the Home Army, smuggling weapons in and out of the Warsaw Ghetto. In Italy, Yugoslavia, and Greece, they joined partisan groups, taking up arms in brutal guerrilla campaigns. They often paid the ultimate price. Thousands of women were deported to concentration camps like Ravensbrück for their resistance activities. Their contributions were often downplayed in the male-dominated histories that followed the war. But the truth is, resistance in occupied Europe would have been impossible without them. They were the network, the support system, and often the daring frontline operatives who fought a secret, desperate war for their homes and their freedom. Conclusion. From the intellectual battleground of Bletchley Park to the deadly skies of the Eastern Front, from the shadowy alleys of occupied France to the roaring factories of America, women were not just contributors to the war effort, they were a fundamental, strategic, and often decisive force. They were codebreakers who outsmarted the enemy, pilots who struck terror from the night sky, snipers who became legends, spies who defied capture, and workers who built the very arsenal of victory. They challenged the prejudices of their time, turning underestimation into their greatest asset. They proved that heroism is not defined by gender, but by courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to a cause greater than oneself. They were the secret weapons of World War II, and it is time their stories were told. The stories of these women are just a fraction of the millions who served, sacrificed, and fought during World War II. Their courage has been hidden in the footnotes of history for far too long. Now, if you found these stories as incredible as we do, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more hidden histories. And let us know in the comments which of these heroines you'd like to see a full documentary on.